Have you ever seen a child punished for a sin he didn't commit? A child born into a world that never asked for him, never even wanted him. This is the story of Nosa, a boy of just 12 years old. But even at that young age, he had already learned what it meant to be unwanted. His name was never said with love, only with shame and regret. Not by strangers, but by the very two people who gave him life, his mother and his father. Nosa wasn't a planned child. He wasn't even a welcome one. He was the result of a secret, a forbidden affair between two married people, Grace and Daniel. They came from two separate homes, had two separate lives, but shared one devastating mistake. When the truth came out, everything exploded. Gossip filled the streets. Churches turned their backs. Friends disappeared. Families broke apart. But in all that noise, no one thought about the child. Not one person asked, "What about Nosa?" Both parents walked away, not because they had no space in their homes, but because they had no space in their hearts. Accepting him meant facing the truth. It meant broken homes, ruined reputations, and shame too heavy to carry. So they chose the easiest way out. They left him with Grace's aging mother, a boy with no love, no answers, and no place to call home. Grandma Ruth was the only light in Nosa's world. She didn't care how he came into the world. She only saw a boy with sad eyes who needed love. And love him she did with everything she had. She told him stories by candlelight, prayed over him every night, and made sure he never went to bed hungry, even when she had to go without. But children are not blind. Nosa noticed. He noticed how his name was never on the birthday guest lists. He noticed how other children laughed with their parents at school events while he sat alone. He noticed how people stared at him in church like he was a stain on white cloth. He asked questions, and Grandma Ruth answered with soft tears in her eyes and a trembling voice. "You are not a mistake, my child. You are a blessing they're too blind to see." And for a while, that was enough. Until the day everything changed. Grandma Ruth, the only soul who had ever made him feel wanted, fell sick. It started with small things, forgetting where she kept things, sleeping longer than usual, coughing that shook her fragile frame. Nosa tried to take care of her. He cooked what little food they had, fetched water, and sat by her bedside reading her favorite Bible verses. But a child can only do so much. The night she passed away, the house felt colder than usual. Nosa held her hand, whispered, "Please don't leave me." But the silence answered him again. This time forever. He was just 12. And he was alone. Truly alone. That was the beginning of a different kind of pain. One that didn't just pierce his heart, but crushed his spirit. His mother came to the funeral, but she stood far back, wearing dark glasses like she was hiding from the world. His father didn't come at all. No one offered to take him in. No one even asked what would happen to the boy. When the burial dust settled, Nosa was left in a crumbling house with no food, no light, and no one. A child rejected by love, left to figure out life all by himself. But this wasn't the end of Nosa's story. It was only the beginning. The days after Grandma Ruth's burial dragged like wounded soldiers. Hunger gnawed at Nosa's belly, but the emptiness inside him was deeper than just food. It was the hollowness of being forgotten by family, by society, by life itself. Nosa learned quickly that pity has an expiration date. At first, neighbors brought leftover food and whispered condolences, but soon they stopped. Everyone had their own problems. He became the boy people avoided eye contact with, the one they crossed the street to ignore. One humid afternoon, a social welfare officer came to the house. She was young, with kind eyes and a clipboard filled with questions that didn't fix anything. "We've contacted your mother," she said gently. "She's agreed to meet with us." Hope flickered in Nosa's chest. But when Grace arrived at the welfare office, she didn't hug him. She didn't ask how he'd been. She just sat stiffly across the room, glancing at the clock more than his face. "I can't take him in," she said bluntly. "My husband doesn't even know the child exists." The officer frowned. "He's your son." Grace's voice cracked, but her eyes stayed dry. "He's also a reminder of everything I lost. I can't bring that into my home." Nosa wanted to scream, to ask why she brought him into the world if she planned to leave him in it alone. but his voice stayed trapped behind clenched teeth. He stared at the floor, the cheap tile pattern blurring as tears welled up in his eyes. Later that week, they tried the father. Daniel's rejection was even colder. "I told you when this started, if anyone finds out, I lose everything," he snapped. "I paid for the hospital bills. That should be enough." That was all he had to say. So, the government placed Nosa in a group home. It was a place filled with other forgotten children, each carrying their own silent wounds. There were rules, curfews, and thin mattresses. The staff was overworked and underpaid. Smiles were rare. Love was rarer. But Nosa survived. He kept himself, kept his head down, and stayed quiet. He learned that being invisible hurt less than being noticed and rejected. Then came Mr. Donald. He wasn't like the others who worked at the group home. He didn't speak in rehearsed kindness or offer forced smiles. He was rough, honest, and real. He saw Nosa. One evening, after Nosa helped fix a broken tap in the kitchen, Mr. Donald sat beside him and said, "You're not your parents' mistake. You're God's project." Nosa blinked. No one had spoken to him like that in a long time. "You've got something in you, boy. I see it. Pain makes diamonds out of coal. But you've got to choose. Will you be bitter or will you be better?" That night, Nosa lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the question. He had every reason to hate the world. But maybe, just maybe, he could find a reason to heal instead. Can the same hands that once hurt you offer healing? What if the road that seems wrong is the only one that leads you home? The man in the black car called himself Mr. Kelvin. He wore a clean shirt, had polished shoes, and smelled of something expensive. Everything about him looked out of place in the dirty, forgotten part of town where Nosa spent most of his days. Mr. Kelvin didn't ask too many questions. He simply handed Nosa a sandwich and a bottle of water. For the first time in days, Nosa tasted real food. He chewed slowly, not because he wanted to, but because he didn't want it to end. Then Mr. Kelvin made his offer. "I run a recycling company. You look like a strong boy. If you work hard, I'll pay you weekly. No stealing, no begging, just honest work." Nosa stared at him. Too many people had made promises and disappeared. Too many hands had offered help only to slap him later. But something about Mr. Kelvin felt different. He wasn't soft or overly kind, but his eyes didn't look at Nosa with pity. They looked at him with possibility. The next morning, Nosa followed him. The company was nothing more than a fenced yard filled with plastic, metal, and cardboard. Other boys were already working, pushing carts, sorting waste, loading trucks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Nosa started sweeping, then sorting, then lifting. Every task burned his arms, strained his back, and soaked his clothes with sweat. But every night, he went home with money in his pocket and something he hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. Days turned into weeks. Nosa saved every coin. He bought a small mattress from a street vendor, then a second-hand radio. He even found a public toilet nearby where he could wash before work. It wasn't much, but it was his. And just when life started to show him a tiny crack of light, it happened. One evening, as the sun disappeared behind the rooftops, Mr. Kelvin called him aside. "I've been watching you," he said. "You're different. You don't just work hard. You think. You're quiet, but you notice things. Would you like to go to school?" Nosa froze. School. The word hit him like a wave. He had stopped dreaming about school long ago. It was a luxury for children with packed lunches, ironed uniforms, and parents waiting at the gate. Not for boys who slept near dumpsters and lived off scraps. "I can't afford it," Nosa muttered, looking away. Mr. Kelvin smiled. "I didn't ask if you could pay. I asked if you want to learn." It felt like someone opening a locked door inside his chest. Something he had buried, something soft and warm, rose to the surface. That night, Nosa didn't sleep. Not because of fear, but because of wonder. Was it really possible that someone saw more in him than just a street boy? Could a new life really begin in the middle of an old one? The following Monday, Nosa wore a donated school uniform and stepped into a classroom for the first time in years. He was older than most of the students. He didn't know the answers, He didn't even have notebooks, but he had fire. He listened. He read. He asked questions. He stayed behind after class. Teachers started to notice. One of them, a quiet woman named Miss Clara, began giving him extra lessons after school. She didn't say much, but when Nosa got his first test results and saw the word excellent at the top, she gave him a simple nod. It was more powerful than 1,000 cheers. But just as things started looking up, life, unpredictable as always, decided to test him again. One rainy afternoon, while walking home, Nosa saw someone familiar. It was his mother. She stood under an umbrella, dressed in fine clothes, speaking with a man who looked like her husband. Their child, a boy about Nosa's age, stood beside them, laughing. Nosa froze. She hadn't seen him yet. She hadn't seen the son she left behind. And in that moment, he felt something rise in him. Not hate, not anger, but emptiness. A question without an answer. Why? He turned around before she could see him. He walked faster. The rain mixed with the tears he didn't know he was still capable of shedding. But as he stepped through the gates of the recycling yard, something in him shifted. Maybe some questions never get answered. But maybe, just maybe, life gives you something better. Not explanations, but redemption. Months passed. Nosa was no longer the lost boy wandering the streets. He was growing, both in body and in purpose. He topped his class. He helped manage the recycling yard on weekends. He started saving for college. Bit by bit, the pieces of his broken past were being shaped into a new future. But life, like the wind, doesn't always blow in one direction. One day, while sorting papers at the yard, Nosa stumbled on an old newspaper that sent a chill through his body. A photo of his father. The headline read, "Respected businessman in legal trouble over fraud scandal." Nosa stared at the picture. It had been years since he saw that face. The man who helped bring him into the world, but never once brought him food, shelter, or even a single word of care. The article said everything was falling apart. His businesses, his public image, even his marriage. Allegedly, he had stolen from investors. Court cases were pending. Properties were being seized. But what struck Nosa most was the mention of his health. The article said he was sick, very sick. Nosa's mind spun. He should have felt nothing, maybe even satisfaction, but he didn't. Instead, a strange ache filled his chest. The boy who once begged for his father's love now had the chance to walk away for good. But something told him not to. 2 days later, out of curiosity more than anything else, he went to the hospital listed in the paper. He didn't ask for permission. He just walked in. And there he was, his father, lying in bed, thin, pale, alone. The man who once hid his existence now looked like a shadow of himself. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. A quiet recognition, not of love, but of shared history. His father blinked slowly. "You came," he whispered. Nosa said nothing. He didn't need to. The man's eyes watered. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," he said, voice weak. "But I was wrong. So wrong. I thought rejecting you would protect my family, but I destroyed everything instead." Nosa stood silently, his heart unsure whether to break or harden. "I see your face everywhere now," his father continued. "In my dreams on the streets you've grown. You look like me." It was the first time Nosa had heard those words, and they broke something inside him, not out of pain, but out of release. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to face what hurt you. He didn't stay long that day, but he returned again and again, not because he wanted father, but because he had become something more than a child of rejection. He had become a man of grace. Weeks later, his father passed away quietly, peacefully, with Nosa holding his hand. The funeral was small. Nosa didn't cry. He didn't need to, because he had already mourned the man long ago. But in that loss came something unexpected. A letter left behind by the man who once wanted to forget him. It read, "To the son I never raised, but who raised himself with more strength than I ever had. I leave you what little I have left, not because it will fix the past, but because you deserve a beginning. Not an apology, a beginning." Attached was the key to a small apartment and a bank account. Nothing lavish, but enough to secure Nosa's future. And with that, the boy born in silence found his voice. He enrolled in college, started a foundation for street children, became a name no longer whispered in pity, but spoken with pride. Years passed. The boy the world once ignored had become a name spoken with admiration across the city. Nosa, once a child of shame, was now a young man of impact. He didn't wear his pain like a badge. He used it like a ladder. The small apartment his father left him became more than a home. It became a center of transformation. He turned it into a safe house for street children. A place where kids like him, abandoned, misunderstood, and forgotten, could eat, sleep, learn, and heal. He named it Grandma Ruth's Place in memory of the only person who ever gave him a reason to believe in love. Soon his story began to spread. Journalists came. Volunteers followed. Donations started trickling in. Nosa never asked for recognition, but his work spoke louder than any headline ever could. He told his story not to gain sympathy, but to spark strength in others. One rainy afternoon, while overseeing renovation at Grandma Ruth's place, he received a call. A soft voice on the other end, nervous, almost broken. It was his mother. He hadn't heard from her in years. She had lost everything: her marriage, her business, her reputation. The truth had come out about Nosa. Her husband left when he discovered the years of silence and deception. Friends distanced themselves. The community that once praised her now looked at her with the same judgment she once gave her own son. "I don't know where else to go," she whispered. Nosa paused. It would have been easy to say no, to hang up, to remind her of the nights he went hungry, the pain of watching her walk away at the funeral, the shame she let him carry alone. But he didn't, because he had learned something powerful. Forgiveness is not weakness. It's freedom. So he said the words that surprised even himself. Come. When she arrived, she couldn't look him in the eye. She expected anger, bitterness, punishment. Instead, he offered her tea and silence. A silence that didn't accuse, but healed. Days later, she broke down. She cried the tears she had buried for over a decade. She asked for forgiveness, not as a mother, but as a broken woman. And Nosa, the boy born of shame, placed his hand gently on hers. "It's okay," he said. "We both lost time. Let's not lose what's left." From that day, she began volunteering at Grandma Ruth's place, washing clothes, cooking, caring for the children. Slowly, she earned back not just her son's trust, but her own dignity. And together, they created a new story, one not built on secrets, but on redemption. Nosa graduated with honors. He expanded the foundation to more towns. He gave speeches at schools, prisons, and shelters. But he never told his story like a tragedy. He told it like a testimony. Because in every heartbreak, there was a lesson. In every betrayal, a turning point. And in every rejection, a seed for greatness. Nosa proved that your beginning does not have to define your becoming. He was born in rejection, raised in pain, but he rose in purpose. Not in spite of his story, but because of it. Sometimes, not all scars are meant to be hidden. Some are proof that survival is possible. You are not the choices of those who failed you. Love can be broken, but it can also be rebuilt. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Like, comment with what part moved you most. Share this video to inspire someone else. And subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories like this. Remember, even the most unwanted seed can grow into the strongest tree. Thank you for watching.